everybody to Whiskey and War Stories, where courage meets conversation. I'm your host, Jaime, with co-host Ryan. Stay tuned for stories from the front lines as we dive into moments that shape us, lessons we carry, and the healing we fight for. This is Season 3, Episode 8. What's up, brother?
What's up, Jaime? How's it going?
Good, man. I have to comment that I like our new intro that we made. It's short, but I like the music. It's good. It fits good. I like it.
Yeah, it gets to the point and gets us to the important stuff of stuff we're trying to accomplish here. I like it.
I like it, man. I like it. How's everything going?
Good. I'm a happy man. Of course, my Dodgers are in postseason, 2-0 against the Phillies, and I'm wearing some blue today to show some support. Not that they need it.
I like it. I like it. I can see it. All right. Well, as is customary, we like to dedicate every Whiskey and War Stories episode to a fallen hero. And for this episode, episode 8, it's going to be dedicated to Deputy Sheriff Charles Riley from the Iberville Parish Sheriff's Department in Louisiana. And there's a picture of our brother right there. Deputy Sheriff Charles Riley was shot and killed while interviewing a suspect at the Iberville Parish Courthouse in Placum Mine, Louisiana. Around 8 p.m., Deputy Riley and another deputy were interrogating a man as part of a sexual assault investigation when a struggle ensued. The suspect grabbed a gun and began firing. He shot both deputies before the deputies returned fire. The suspect died at the scene. Both the deputies were transported to a hospital where Deputy Riley succumbed to his wounds. The other deputy is in critical condition. Deputy Riley was a United States Navy veteran and had served with the Sheriff's Department for 6 years. He is survived by his wife and 2 daughters. Cause of death, gunfire. And this is just pretty much hot off the press. This happened yesterday evening. So to Deputy Sheriff Riley, cheers, brother. Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Looks so young. Looks like a kid.
Yeah, and 6 years. The big picture. Not that much time when you talk about like a 30, 35-year career. Just sad. And I always hate hearing the last part when. I mean, it doesn't make it any better that if they don't have a wife and kids, but it's always it's I guess a little bit extra painful when they have a wife and definitely 2 young daughters, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
So rest in peace, brother.
Rest in peace.
Okay, Ryan, you have the drink today. What are we drinking?
The drink. Part of what we do, right?
Yes, sir.
Is the drink. So, in honor of the Dodgers, I have a special edition Dodgers Maker's Mark, which I'm sure a lot of us have had, but it's oldie but a goodie. But
can you stick that up to the camera?
Absolutely.
I've never seen that bottle before.
Yeah.
Where'd you get that at?
It was a gift from my brother, Adrian.
Oh, wow. That's nice.
Yeah, he did good.
Really, really, really nice. I'm also drinking, I just got a bottle of Redwood Empire. So,
that's a cool looking bottle, too.
Yeah, it is. Sonoma County, so it has that wine bottle kind of shape. Let me give you the alcohol content here. So 45, so we're at 95. I'm sorry, 90. So it's actually pretty smooth, but nice bottle.
Yeah.
California distilled bourbon whiskey, so very good. I highly recommend it. Price point about $40 a bottle, so not too expensive. Good stuff.
That's good.
Yeah. Okay. As usual, we got a great guest lined up that's got some good stuff to share with us. Ryan, I know that this was actually your guest this week, so you want to give us a little bio on him?
Yeah, so Travis and I met at Command College, which is like a 14-month program, a long program. Law enforcement professionals from lieutenant and above, they go every year. And it's once a week, every other month for 14 months, and it's a lot of work. So Travis and I and another good friend, Andrew Jenks, who was a deputy chief over in Glendale, were kind of the guys that didn't take themselves too seriously. Everybody in class was awesome, but we were kind of like those guys in class who immediately bonded, and that's where I met Travis. But let me read you his bio now. We'll getting to know this fine individual. Good. So Travis Tibbets began his career following the footsteps of his father, who spent nearly 3 decades with the West Covina Police Department. Travis became the department's very first second-generation officer and its first second-generation SWAT officer. With more than 2 decades at West Covina, Travis worked in nearly every corner of the job: patrol, traffic investigations, and special enforcement. Along the way, he rose through the ranks and attained the rank of lieutenant, and he did kind of a unorthodox and a bold thing, but a great move. He lateraled over to the Verne Police Department last year as a captain. While he was at West Covina, Travis was on the SWAT team, half of that as a sniper, and he had the opportunity to train at Blackwater, North Carolina, with Ron Avery out of Colorado. He has been involved in 2 successful hostage rescue incidents, which we'll get into tonight, which led to him working with Post and basically traveling around nationwide instructing other police officers. Travis holds degrees from Citrus College and the University of La Verne and is a graduate of Sherman Block, SLI, and of course, Command College. He's currently enrolled in the master's degree program at University of San Diego, as you are, Jaime, right? Master's degree?
Actually, I think we're in the same class.
Are you really?
Yeah.
And lastly, Travis has been recognized with 2 citations and the Bronze Star from the West Covina Police Department. That is Travis.
Without further ado.
What's going on?
What's up, brother? How are you?
I'm good. It's kind of weird listening to someone talk about you, but
it's a very impressive bio. And I think the 2 hostage incidents stood out. You know, most people, it's like a shooting, right? It's very rare to get in a shooting in law enforcement. Generally speaking, per officer, the statistics of getting in a shooting aren't really that high. Most cops go through their careers without ever having to fire their gun, on duty. And then even more rare is having to deal with like a hostage situation, and the fact that you were in multiple situations like that. Wow, that's pretty intense.
Yeah, I was years ago when I used to go talk to people about those incidents. Coming across people that work for smaller municipal police departments or mid-sized police departments, like where I worked, West Covina, much more uncommon. Not necessarily to get involved in a shooting, and that happens. It happens at where you guys work, where I worked. But for someone to work in a smaller police department to happen to come across 2 hostage situations, pretty rare. A little bit more common maybe for a full-time SWAT operator,
sure.
Sheriff's Department or LAPD, where they work, 20 years working as SWAT operators. A little bit more common, but pretty uncommon in a smaller police department for sure. Why my name was pulled, I don't know, but the good Lord was with me, man.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I love hearing that. So tell us a little about yourself, Travis. Give us some background. Growing up, family, what led you to, I know you kind of touched on your father was a cop, so I kind of assume that's what led you to be. But give us a little bit of background about yourself.
Yeah, so I was raised mostly in a town called La Verne, which is where I now work. It's for those that don't know La Verne, it's a small town, not too big. It's very, very community oriented, very safe. A lot of people describe it kind of like Mayberry. And I came to live with my dad in about 3rd grade. So prior to that, my parents were divorced. So I lived with my mother from the point where my parents got divorced. I think it was around 4, and I lived with her up to about 5th grade. And that was my mom was an alcoholic, so she struggled with that. And then eventually, my dad got custody of us because of her problems. But I'll tell you, once I got to La Verne, I had a very good upbringing, very good childhood, and I was raised by a cop. Very, not a lot of trauma, but even being raised by a cop, my dad didn't talk about police work that much. It's a little different. Some people think, oh, he brought that home, and my father, he really didn't. I tell people, I didn't grow up shooting guns. I didn't shoot a handgun, or any gun until I was in the academy. So although I was raised by a cop, I wasn't, raised in that culture,
Sure.
Too much. My dad didn't socialize too much, when I was growing up with people that he worked with. So, obviously I looked up to him, because that's what he did for a job, but he never came home wearing a gun. Like, I never really saw that. So he kind of separated us from that. So, not a lot of, I didn't grow up having a lot of conflict. I grew up in a community where everyone got along.
Right.
I didn't grow up in a tough neighborhood or anything. So, becoming a police officer was a learning curve for me when I first got there, but I've enjoyed it. That's for sure. So, so I grew up, playing sports. I wasn't too good at baseball, so I ended up playing water polo in high school, and then I went to college, played water polo in college for a couple of years, and then had that opportunity where my dad came to me and said, "Hey, West Covina is opening up to hire people from the outside." I think I was about 22 at this time, and it's the first time that they had done that in many years. So threw my name in the hat, and out of, I think, 100 and something people, it was me and another guy that got hired, and that other guy never made training, so I was the one that made it off that list. And had a fortunate opportunity to work with my dad for a few months, probably about 8 months.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in training in the detective bureau, but I learned pretty quick, that he was kind of a legend there, and as far as an investigator goes, so I had a lot to live up to. I really tell my chief, like, I'm not too worried about disappointing you as much as I am disappointing my father when I started there, right? So,
Right.
So it made me work hard. I wanted to do well. Yeah.
Go ahead, Ryan. He said something that I wanted to touch on.
Go ahead, Amy.
You said that your father didn't bring home the job a lot. Like, he didn't see him in like uniform and stuff. Do you think that was by design?
Yeah, my dad, really, he's a civil engineer by trade. So he was a valedictorian out of high school, super intelligent guy. Went to college out of high school, Cal Poly Pomona, get an engineering degree. His mother died when he was young, so I think he felt the push to go get a job pretty quick when he was young. But he never was really that, that stereotypical cop attitude. My father never really had that. So
Correct.
I never really had the conversations with him if he specifically tried to keep it away from us, but I think he, for himself and maybe his own well-being, he separated it. And he did a pretty good job of it. And, my dad, he never drank alcohol. He didn't drink, he didn't smoke. He was relatively pretty square, right? But he took a lot of pride in his job, and but he never really shared it with us. So I really didn't hear all the stories of my father until I actually got at West Covina.
Oh, wow.
I did hear he did share some as I became an adult and I got a little older, but and I asked him those questions, but he didn't come home sharing those. And once I was a little older and going into police work, he did share some critical incidents he was involved in, which, I never knew. He spent 10 years investigating homicides, and, there was a lot that he did, and that was in the 80s. So, there's a lot of activity, a lot of things he saw, and I started, processing how he coped with all that. And it's, especially back then when they didn't have a lot of resources on peer support and everything else. Right. So, yeah. And it's kind of interesting, the first thing my dad being old school, the first thing I told him, hey, I'm going to apply for this job. And he sat me down, and the first thing he wanted to know is if I'm able to take someone's life. I remember specifically him asking me that question. Are you able to do this? Are you able to pull the trigger if you have to? It's kind of funny because I was a 22-year-old kid going, yeah, whatever, but you don't think about it, until you really start getting going in it and, realizing what that possibility is after, going through the academy process and coming out in field training and everything. But it's interesting that I think back that he asked me that question and how things turned out, in my career,
Right. And now with your own family, do you think that you shield stuff from them, kind of like your own upbringing, or are you different in that respect?
Yeah, they do say the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. Not as much as my dad did, but I definitely did shield my kids. They're both in high school now, particularly when they were younger. But I didn't really hide the uniform or hide the gun or anything. And, sometimes I'd come home and I still have it on and they'd see it, and they would know. But, I didn't start sharing stories with my kids until they were teenagers. And then my daughter in particular seemed way more interested than my son and would ask me questions, and she wants to go into the line of work too. So, she would ask, and, we shared some stuff. So they learned about, some things I was involved in later, one's 17 and one's 15. So in the past couple of years, they know. But, I was on the news a lot. So I was a PIO at West Covina for years. So they would, mom, every time I was on the news, mom, I would text mom, my wife, and she would pop it up and my kids would see, oh, there's my dad, in uniform. So that created a lot more questions. So I don't shield them as much. What I do try to do with my kids is I try to tell stories so that they're, safe and they're not victims, and they're aware. I utilize it that way more than anything.
Travis, you were talking about the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, and your dad didn't act like a cop. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying about Command College, how we kind of hooked up together. It's because you didn't act like that.
Yeah.
On this podcast, we talk a lot about work-life balance, and it was just nice to talk to a regular dude, down to earth. We weren't talking about guns and pursuits all day. We were talking about other stuff.
Yeah.
And then when the nitty-gritty came where it was time to work, we did. But I'm sure you are a chip off the old block.
Yeah, I've always found that I needed to separate, work from home, and not that I didn't value, my work life or the people that were in my life working, because I did. I just categorized it differently. I just needed that breathing room, because it does, when you get around cops, the war, no pun intended, but the war stories start, right? The whiskey flows and the war stories go.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But with you in Command College and Andrew, our other buddy that we hooked up with, we seemed to talk about more things, whether we were having a cigar and a drink, than we did, whether it was family or whatever it was. We did not so much war stories, right? And that was kind of nice, it's people generally don't like to talk about themselves too much, right? Because then you just start annoying people. So
some do.
Yeah.
That's a really great point that you bring up. Well, both of you bring up, actually, because we've talked about this on a couple different episodes in the past. That I think some of the best cops, even military veterans, anybody in like a first responder type of community, the best ones that I've met, the ones that I wanted to emulate, the people that I look up to, were always the ones that have that work-life balance, right? So I think too much of anything is bad, right? And that goes right along the lines of what you both were saying, that you guys clicked because it wasn't, for lack of better words, it wasn't like you weren't eating, sleeping, and shitting cops when you were around each other, right? You weren't just sharing war stories. You were talking about baseball, and you were sharing drinks together and all these other things. And for me personally, I think at the point that in my career that I'm at now, I actually cherish those, and I get along with people that are like-minded like that have other interests other than just police work. Because at a certain point, it becomes mundane, right? The stories are all kind of the same, and people are chest puffing and that sort of thing. So I found that the best cops, the best leaders, are the ones that have that balance, the ones that don't always talk about it, the ones that have, friends that aren't cops and can talk about other things like family and, things they enjoy doing besides just work. So that was a pretty good point that, when you guys, that really jumped out for me, at least when you guys talked about how you guys kind of found common grounds and clicked. So, that was a pretty interesting point.
Yeah. And when you start having children, and I know Ryan's got a son, and Jaime, I know you don't have children, but that I'm aware of, but
or me either, that I'm aware of either.
You might, right? You might have someone. You start to socialize with other people, and when your whole life is being a police officer, being a cop,
Sure.
You lose perspective because most people do not go through the traumatic experiences at the rate that a police officer will, and that doesn't matter where you work, whether you work for Laverne or a busier town like Pomona, or even outside of California, Chicago. Most people don't go through and see the things and see the evil
right.
that we see and how it affects us. And if you start hanging out with those people and spending time with people that don't do this as a career, and that's all you talk about, that you don't find any common ground, right? They don't want to hear it all the time, and they don't, although some people might be interested here and there in a story, but typically they want to relate to you, and it's hard to develop friendships that are healthy, particularly for well-being and your mental state. Being a police officer, to be able to get out of that environment and know that life really isn't that evil and that bad all the time everywhere, is important. It's important. And I discovered that pretty early. And most of my friends, and I got friends that do a variety of careers from, I got a good buddy that works at APU that does fundraising over there, and, great leader, has great, we talk about leadership and God and stuff, and all the time. And, all the way from that to, bankers or attorney, it's just good to have a good different perspective, to know that, it's not all critical incidents all the time. Right.
So Travis, so you're a second generation SWAT guy. Your dad was on SWAT. I myself have 3 brothers in law enforcement. One's retired. My question to you is, did you feel like pressure to be your son's kid, especially being in SWAT, and how did you handle that? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so it's funny because when I first got to West Covina, I remember talking to this old officer that mentioned something about my father, and I remember firing off at him like, I'm not my excuse me, I'm not my dad, right? Like, I wanted to be different than him. I didn't, I wanted to be seen as an individual. And and particularly for the first 10 years I was there, all my sergeants and lieutenants and everything were all partners with my father. So it's cool in one aspect that you're a bit of a legacy in an organization, and you get to come up. There's a lot to live up to, particularly since my dad had a very good reputation at the department there. But I wanted to be myself, and when it came to SWAT, fortunately for me, by the time I got to SWAT was 2004, 2005, when because I think I had to do 5 years before I was eligible to get on SWAT there. And that's a pretty cool picture. I can explain that one because that was a fun time. But anyway, my dad was on SWAT operator in the 70s. So there was a lot of time that had passed. So everyone that was on the team at that time never worked on SWAT with my dad. So I was able to separate that there. But I'll tell you, you all both being, SWAT operators at one point, if you're not still, I know Ryan is, and I don't know, Jaime, if you're still involved with the team over there, but there's a lot of expectations when you get on the team, right? There's a lot of stress to perform, whether it's shooting or handling wherever you're at, whatever your role is on the team. There's a lot of pressure, and I don't know how it was at Pomona, but I could tell you, like at West Covina, there was a lot of training with HRT, with hostage rescue stuff, because that is what West Covina felt what the bread and butter of a SWAT team was. And when we trained, almost every training session, we had modules of doing that, and I know even at one point we trained with Pomona down over at Camp Pendleton, and we did some of that, and movement and HRT, and I don't know if you guys did this, but you miss the hostage, or you shoot a hostage, or you miss the suspect, man, you got to run, right? Like there's a lot of pressure. You don't want your teammates, your brothers on the SWAT team thinking you're fucked up, right? So, although I didn't have the pressure in the sense on the SWAT with my father, I did in the department, working, day to day, because where I worked was collateral duty, like most smaller, mid-sized police departments. But
Sure.
But the pressure performance was high on the SWAT team at West Covina for sure.
How long did you work with your dad for, Travis?
So it was about 8 months. So,
okay.
Yeah, I think it's maybe less. So I got out. Well, actually, I take that back. It was less. So I was in the academy while he was there, and that was 20 weeks. And then, so it's probably about 4 months, because I think my dad retired in April of 2000, and I got out of the academy in December of 2000. So there's about 4 or 5 months there where we were actually in the same building, but I didn't see him too much because he was in the detective bureau and I was mostly in training and then out on my own for a short period of time. So I asked him to work with me one shift, but he wouldn't do it. Typical father, didn't want to do it.
Sorry.
I was going to say, we had one of our newer cops, Walzak.
Mm-hmm.
He went on patrol the other day, and he took his dad on a ride along. And his dad is the chief for Covina PD, really good dude. And I watched the BWC after, because I was reviewing what ended up being a pursuit. So I'm watching BWC of father and son in a pursuit, and this is the banter between, "Hey pops, which way did he go?" It was just awesome to hear. But I mean, if I was in pursuit with my son, I'd be like, "Stop the car! You're not going to chase anybody. I'm going to protect you from harm." So I always wonder what that's like. I can imagine for your dad what it was like bringing you on to this profession.
Yeah. It's weird. I've never had those conversations with him, that if he was ever worried about me. I can't imagine that he wasn't. Now he'd call me all the time. We would talk all the time. So that kind of leads me to believe he was checking in. Right. But my dad was, he's old generation, man. Like he's all about being tough and getting through things. Right. And, not so much like some of the other people that he came up with at the department, man. I share this early on, before peer support and wellness and all that was a big thing. I was talking to some old timer there, and he literally told me, "Hey, you got a fucking problem here? You need some counseling? Go find Jack, Jim, or Jose and get through it." Right? Like that was how that was their approach, man. That was the culture. And I'll tell you, like I didn't drink alcohol in high school or anything. I wasn't that kid, but being, starting in police work 25 years ago, that was a big part of the culture. It was a big part of our SWAT team too. We would always say, play hard, work hard. Right. And we took on that motto on the team, and it was good times, but my dad never, he's kind of the guy that doesn't share too many feelings, right? Like he's that old school type of guy. I mean, I know he cares, but he doesn't really expose himself that way. I think more as he's gotten older, but he would check in, but not, I don't think he really expressed himself too much, very quiet, type of guy.
That leads me into a question I want to ask, and it's really unique for you because a lot of times when we have cops on as guests, they're not really generational. They're the first time, and they're the first cop in their family, or they have extended family that's cops. In your particular case, you followed in the footsteps of your father. So in terms of mental health speaking, you have your father that old school, and more than likely, mental health, at least back then, was probably somewhat non-existent. Or, like you said, if you need help, go have a drink and deal with your problems, in silence, so to speak. Um, how do you deal with that now? So growing up and learning from your father to be that tough, have that tough exterior. How how do you operate? Do you operate that same way? And like, you know, believing that mental health is something that should be, deal with it in private, or in your position now, is it different? Do you advocate for like, hey, times are different now. We encourage people to get mental health. What's the separation between the generations there?
Yeah. So, man, yeah, you're gonna walk with me on this one for a minute.
Hit us.
So I really came up kind of with the thick skin to deal with it type of attitude. And even as I was a lieutenant at West Covina, admittedly, I was not, I have buddies over there at West Covina that always said, oh, Travis isn't the peer support guy. And I really have changed lately on that, but I really did keep it private, right? Like there's always, all the departments always have like the counseling team is one thing out here in our area, right? Which is
Sure.
a program where police officers or anyone employed by the police department can go get some counseling from an organization that provides resources to police departments. But that was always done in private, right?
Right.
It was something that they send the bill over to the city and they don't say who it was, right? And the city, the PD or the city pays the bill, and that's how it was until wellness and peer support in recent years became a big thing. And I had a hard time buying into it because I felt like if you got into this job, you need to be able to do this job, and you need to think about it if you can't. That was my attitude for a long time.
Right.
And I'll tell you, it was wrong. I was a lieutenant not too long ago, and we had a newer officer that ended up committing suicide. And that was my first experience over at West Covina. And I didn't know the young man very well because he was just getting out of training. But I really reflected on that. Why this young man would do this, and how did we not catch it? And me as a leader in the organization, man, what did I portray there? What did I permeate through the department, saying that
Right.
not supporting? I didn't verbally not support it, but I didn't proactively support peer support either, like I should have. As times were changing, I look back at that and like, man, could I have done one thing that maybe changed this young man's life or make that decision of doing that, right? And and how it affected all the other employees in the department. I kind of stood back and watched that, and we happened to he didn't show up for work, and he lived down in the next town over from West Covina, which was La Puente, and
Sure.
we sent 2 patrol officers to go knock on his door, right? And they were there to discover their buddy or their partner had killed himself, which made it even
recent, right?
Yeah, that was a few years ago.
Yeah.
And the outpouring of support really opened my eyes, seeing everyone coming into the department. I mean, I think we had like 3 service dogs there, and I used to always make a joke, we really got to have a dog, right? Like, but they really do make a difference for people. And I think, particularly the younger generation really understands that wellness and that importance of mental health to be able to get through their careers successfully. And I value it a lot differently now. And here at Laverne, they have a very good peer support wellness program going, and really it's about, I always thought, oh, this is just a checkbox thing, right? To make people feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And in some departments it is, but they really need to really be successful. They got to make it the culture, right? There's got to be a culture of wellness, and everyone's got to buy into it and understand the importance of it. And I think, at West Covina for a long time, it was a checkbox item, but really it was that way because of people like me that weren't buying into it, which didn't help the employees there at all. And I'll tell you, if I could go back and do it over again, I would, because I realize how important it is.
What was the paradigm shift? Was it the suicide that you experienced there? Is that what caused you to kind of flip the switch?
The suicide, although I did have a lot of questions about that, and is it really our fault? Like this young man predisposed? Was there something else? He'd only been there 6 months. I did all the
what ifs.
questioning. The shift for me was really probably my children, and that's weird to relate it to work, but seeing my daughter who's 17 and having a lot of anxiety, and these high school kids now having a lot of anxiety, and how that can build into a career when these young people become police officers or whatever career they go, that still builds, and they have no outlet, and counseling and different stuff that really helps people. I think it opened my eyes. Like, I guess it's the why not? Like, why not? Why not promote, right? Why would we not? It's definitely an investment worth it. If it helps one person, I guess, we're doing something right. I used to always question, like, well, okay, who's taking advantage of it, right? Like, because, at West Covina, it did really become part of the culture by the time I left, which is a great thing. But, we would identify, if someone experienced something critical, like they saw, a traumatic, fatal car accident or something, or a young kid that died in front of them, we would give them some time off, right? We even, West Covina even got to the point where they would give dispatchers time off, and we gave the whole department time off after the young man that took his own life. And then part of me, I'm like, okay, who's taking advantage of this? Who really cares? But, I think about it now, I'm like, who cares, right? I mean, who cares? A few dollars can keep our people healthy in the long run. And, I just think it's growth, man. Like, I just think the older I get, and not suppressing how I feel and, about things. And I'll tell you, like, when in my incidents that I've been through, one in 2005, one in 2010, there was no offer of there was no peer support. There was no offer of any of that, right? It was my buddies, hey, let's go get a drink and let's talk about it, man. Like, this is cool. They kind of make you, there's the heroism thing, right? For a short period of time until the next one, right? And then everyone forgets that you were the last one, right? I can get into that later, because that's about the most unhealthy thing you could do is go drink.
Well, to add to that, and I would say that I guess having the podcast, I'm fortunate enough to know a little bit of background about this, right? So, that old school way of handling those critical incidents, like, hey, let's after everything's said and done, let's go to the bar, let's have some drinks, and let's talk about this. And in my experiences, in dealing with the old school cops who come on podcasts and talk, and honestly, even having gone through those experiences myself and being in OISs in a time where mental health was still a bit taboo. Now it's on the forefront, but in the early 2000s, it was still a little taboo. I have found that it's a temporary fix, right? So, for those old school cops that have done that and went out drinking, talked to their buddies, it's a temporary fix, and it may even be temporary to the point where it sustains you through the life of your career, right? And you can retire and you're cool. But what I found that 9 out of 10 times is that once folks leave this profession, that left those areas unchecked, and they got they got the mental help that they perceived was help, which was talking with their friends over a bottle. I found 9 out of 10 times that those people still suffer from PTSD in their retirement years and in their 60s and 70s. And Ryan and I can attest that we've actually reached out to old school cops, some that were Pomona cops, that were looked upon as as gods in Pomona. They were the old school cops that everybody respected, and we've asked on the show and talk to us about what it was like. And a handful of them have told us they couldn't do it because they felt it was just too much, that they never really addressed their traumas. And, it still haunts them to this day. And some of these guys are in their 70s, so it just goes to show you the difference in, those things. At least to me now, I see those as temporary fixes, right? Because, I've been involved in critical incidents, and I've done that too. We're like, hey, let's go out. Let's go talk about this over some drinks. And, I think that's a temporary fix, right? But we want something that's going to sustain, something that's deliberate, something that's going to keep us going for the long haul. And I think that's where the difference between the generation now, the culture that we sort of foster now versus, back then being tough and let's get over it over, having a glass of whiskey and stuff. So
Yeah. I think when I was coming up, if you showed weakness or concern that you were having some problems, or even if it was relatively minor, right? Because everybody processes things different. Everyone is affected by events differently at different times, because sometimes it comes out later. It doesn't come out right away. And, I think back when I was coming up and when we were all really coming up, if you showed weakness, your partner's, you would worry about your partner's questioning you, like, hey man, can you do this job? Are you gonna have my back? If I get in a fight or I chase someone, are you coming? Are you going to help? Like, are you okay? And just the fear of being looked at as you're weak, right? We all have to go in the locker room together and get changed, and that's where all the shit talking happens, right? Yep. That's where it all occurs before you hit briefing or whatever. And you want to. I've never met a police officer that didn't, a cop that didn't want to fit in with everybody in the department, right? You didn't want to be that outcast. And that was the, mental wellness was not at all in the culture at all, anywhere that I saw. And it wasn't until recent years. I'm not saying that going to get a drink and talking with your friends and stuff, there isn't a time and place for that. I would just suggest that you need to process an event first. You need to get through your mental understanding of what occurred and how you're processing before you go out and drink, because the drinking just represses things to where, you feel good. But the problem is
it's still there.
You go back home alone a lot of times, even if you got family there. If you're drunk after something, you're back home alone, really, right? Like you're in your own thoughts, know.
And that just numbs the pain. It doesn't make it go away, right? The drink, the alcohol, it numbs it. It makes it feel good temporary, right? But once the hangover wears off and the dust settles, it's still there. And a lot of times, it can cause it to be exacerbated, right? Because we hit stuff like the alcohol and it causes more emotions to come up, and those type of things. So
the problem is you feel good when you're drinking the alcohol and you're repressing all those feelings, and when you come out of that, typically you have no one to talk to. And what does it do, right? It's a cycle. It pushes you back into it. Like, I'm going to go back and feel good again. Like, if I go have some drinks with my buddies, if they show up, you're the hero again or whatever, and there's a difference between, being a hero and being responsible, the responsibility of being a police officer. And, there's a difference between that. And, I tell people now that go through things and not just critical incidents. Critical incidents are different, right? Like, even mine were different, the ones I went through, because there's a difference between, being in a fight or a confrontation that almost took your life, and something that's just really stressful, and everyone handles that differently. But I always tell people, don't, avoid the alcohol for a while. Exercise is better. There's a better way to approach it. And everyone starts talking at different times. So
and we're so fortunate in today's modern policing era that I always wonder what our old school cops would say now. They're like, we have employee assistance, we have peer support, We have CT counseling team available 24/7 at a cop's disposal. We got a fucking dog that walks around our station to make you feel better. We got vending machines now that dispense healthy food, and we do all these things. We have days that we have people come over and have coffee set up in the department, and we'll have a barbecue, and it's all wellness stuff. And I always wonder if the cops then they'll look at it, and I always wonder if they say to themselves, man, I wish we had that at our disposal, or if maybe they tell themselves this is just a weaker generation of cops. We didn't need any of that stuff. I always wonder what those old school cops think about the type of how we've envisioned mental health now.
Yeah. I think people get tied into their values and their beliefs, right? It's really hard to get them off of that.
They really do.
And how our parents were raised compared to how we were raised and how we're raising our children, and the generational differences. I think it's very obvious to me that today's police officer, the younger generation, they have a much better work-life balance than we do. Most of them earn time and burn time, man. Like they value being off, and that can be frustrating sometimes when you're a leader of the organization, you're trying to fill schedules and stuff, and you have overtime and whatever. But at the same time, they might got it right. They have to stay in this career a lot longer than we do, because of, at least in California, and the changes in retirement and how they have to work later and how they're going to do it. I think they're actually on the right path, and valuing their time away. And I'm curious to see what the data will look like with marriages and divorce rates and different stuff, that as wellness and is still particularly new, at least at getting incorporated in cultures of police departments. So how that data will come out in 10 years from now on more sustainable marriages or partnerships or whatever it is, that people value, because we're incorporating all these new things, and where will it balance out? Because I feel like it kind of wellness is spiking up. Where's that line going to be where it's just even, and now we found the right spot, right?
Right.
So Travis, you guys were talking about the way cops deal with stress, and sometimes they self-medicate, and they don't know that moderation that they need to have. But I think sometimes cops have different reasons why they have stress. It's either chronic stress over the career of seeing babies die, seeing that type of stuff. It's stuff at home, like you mentioned, marriages. It's internal strife at the police department, promotions. You didn't get a special detail you wanted. And then sometimes the stressors come from an acute critical incident, which is kind of me segueing to what I'm excited to hear about from you, is you were involved in 2 critical incidents. I'll just turn it over to you. Can you just play us beginning to end how they played out on scene, and then we'll get into some questions of the aftermath.
Yeah. Okay. So the first incident that I was involved in was about 5 years of being a police officer. So I was assigned to a surveillance team, a special enforcement team. 5 years on, we all know, you're just getting comfortable. Things are fun, having a good time. And I'll tell you, like, of course, we all get out of the police academy and we all think, oh, could this happen to me? We go through the what ifs. What if I'm involved in the shooting? But then you don't, I didn't think about it all the time. Of course, when I, would work patrol, I would run through scenarios in my head, which I think was very healthy about preparing. But when the moment comes, it's a lot different, right? So I was with a partner and I just finished up surveillance. We were at a park in West Covina, and I'm in plain clothes. So I got a Glock 30 just shoved in my waistband, typical surveillance cop, right? Totally unprepared. No radio on me. Back then we had those Nextel push to talks. That's how we did our surveillance. If you guys can remember those, right?
We had those
things, And I told my partner, hey, I gotta go take a piss. I gotta go run up to the bathroom. And I had my a gun shoved in my waistband and plain clothes and a little Nextel push to talk cell phone. And as I'm walking up, I see this couple. They're arguing, but it's hostile, like it's intense, right? So I get on and I tell my partner, hey, roll up here, right? there's probably going to be a domestic violence or something on here because they're getting to it, right? And I don't know if he heard me, man, because it didn't seem like he showed up too fast. but he was just in the parking lot, and he's like, yeah, whatever. But as I'm walking towards the bathroom, I'm just kind of watching them. They don't know I'm a cop, and I'm just watching them. And the next thing, the guy just starts wailing on the chick, puts her in a headlock and just starts punching her. So of course I'm like, all I got is a handgun. So for whatever reason, I decided to put him at gunpoint. And say, hey, back off, police officer or whatever. And it moved so fast. He turned her around. He was a short guy, but he turned her around, got her in a headlock, and he pulled out a box cutter. So he has this box cutter, and he's like, displaying it towards me. He starts slashing at her throat, and I can't tell, is he cutting her throat? I don't see blood or anything, and so he starts to hide behind her. Right, his head. I'm like, hey man, let her go. Drop what I thought was a knife at the time, but it was a box cutter. I'm like, drop the knife, man. And he starts backing. I start to aggress him, close distance. And I remember distinctly thinking, man, I gotta get closer so I don't miss this. I don't know why. I'm like, get a little closer. And the unique thing about it is I didn't feel in danger. Right? It was a small knife, so I didn't feel like, oh, this guy's gonna hurt me.
Sure.
But he's like peeking his head out and hiding behind her, but he's like what I think is slashing at her throat, and he starts to back away from me. He goes down this hill. There's like a slope, and I follow him, and he slips, and he turns and exposes his lower half only. So like his waist down, maybe a little bit of his bottom part of his torso. And for whatever reason, I decided to shoot him through the legs. Right, it was a side profile. I shot him through the right leg, went through the whole right leg, barely missed his nuts, and went the other leg. Found that out after, and I went to grab her because I think I had been on SWAT for a short period of time because I just got on, and I went to grab her with my offhand, and he came up and sliced my hand with the box cutter.
Oh shit!
So she gets away and she starts running up, and I was gonna readdress him, but then I see the box cutter flying out of his hand. So I'm like, okay, he's down on the ground. And then my partners finally show up and don't know that I shot him and jump right on him, right where I shot him. And he screams. I'm like, hey, I shot him, and that. I could tell you the one interesting thing from that one is it happened fast, but I do distinctly remember, and Jaime, you probably have a lot of this being deployed, and I don't know, but like all my senses really came in. So it got, the noise was muffled, if you will. Everything was slow motion, and then once it was all settled, it was almost like a pop, like everything opened up, like almost coming down from like high altitude. It really, and I remember people telling me that occurs when you're involved in an incident. So obviously all my stress or whatever it was at the time came in, and it just opened up. And from there, everyone was real supportive, but there was no, obviously it worked out, right? The guy lived. As a matter of fact, he ended up going to prelim and taking a deal, and Cordy thanked me for not killing him, which was interesting, right? And then he did like 8 years in prison or whatever, and then got back out at some point. But the aftermath of that, I'll tell you, like, it was kind of weird. Not that one, I didn't feel too particularly stressed, at least initially. They give you the few days off, shooter's holiday, which is probably a terrible thing to say, but that's kind of what we all used to say. Right? Go get your time off, go see the psychologist and whatnot. And I think because I wasn't necessarily in danger, I equivalated it in my mind like just a typical use of force. It just happened to be a firearm, right? A shooting. But I didn't feel any type of much of anything until probably like a month after. And then I started reprocessing everything in my head. Like, what if it went wrong? What if I hit her? What if I started doing the what if loop,
right.
and I never really like seeked out. I remember talking to my wife, but I never really seeked out any particular type of help. It was the typical, hey, let's go get some beers, right? I had a really good buddy with me that always was game to go get a drink, right, hang out. But if I could do that over again, it probably would have been good, to say, just talk through the what happened with somebody, right? Like in a healthy way, not in a, because when people want to go glamorize you or heroize you, because I always tell people, hey, in smaller police departments, when you get involved in OIS, you almost become like this. If it's a good one, you almost become like this hero, right?
Sure.
And no one remembers you until the next one, and then no one remembers that you were that one, right? Like you're done. It's
He survived.
Yeah. So
the suspect survived that incident.
He did. That suspect survived that incident. So moving forward to that, that's when I started. That's kind of when I got on SWAT. So I took that whole thing, trained hard, whatever, and I didn't have a lot of post trauma or anything from that one, other than I would replay it in my head. Sometimes I would have dreams about it. And can't control it, but not like crazy. But I would wake up going, that was weird, right? Rethinking it,
right?
But nothing that I addressed with anybody. But I'm leading into the next one, so this is where it kind of gets more. So,
Travis.
Yes. So before you segue into that one, I want to touch on a couple things that you mentioned about like time distortion and stuff like that. So if I could touch on that real quick before you kind of segue, this is a good thing for kind of our followers too that may have experienced something similar. So, and I was just told this from through therapy and through therapists that have been on the podcast. So, what you experienced is very typical. In my OIS too, I also experienced the same thing, and they call it the neurobiology of survival. So basically, in high stress situations, the body floods itself with like adrenaline. So when it floods itself with adrenaline or the stress hormone, it causes it to like sharpen your focus. It boosts like your reaction time. So because of that, there's always a time distortion. So sometimes time will go really fast. Other times, time slows down. Like in my particular shooting, the time will slow down. I remember seeing everything in like slow motion as it happened. And the science behind that is when on a normal basis, when everything is hunky dory, so to speak, we think with like our prefrontal cortex. In stress situations, the part of the brain that takes over is the amygdala. That's like I don't know what they call it, the survival portion of the brain. And so when we shift from the prefrontal cortex to like the amygdala, things become distorted. So it's very, very, very common in like stress situations, especially like OISs. When we become involved in those, when we look back, we're like, oh my gosh, it seemed like, some people say it happened in a fraction of a second and it actually took like 5 minutes, or some people will say, man, it felt like it went on forever. And in reality, it only, it was over in 30 seconds. So that's interesting that you bring that up. Because I think that's very, very, very common in, those high stress type of situations. But anyways, I just wanted to throw a little food for thought out there before I interrupted you. Sorry.
Yeah, well, that's actually a very valid point, because as I lead into the next one, which was about 5 years later, I actually experienced some of that other stuff you just talked about. So the next one, I had been on SWAT for about 5 years. I'd been a sniper. I got moved over to the sniper side, and I was over there for a while. And I'll tell you, like, we had 4 snipers assigned on our collateral team, and I always make this joke. I was probably the worst shot on the team. Like, my good buddy was a scout sniper instructor in the Marine Corps that was on that team. Had another guy that's just a phenomenal shooter that happened to be on that team, and I was always the guy that was, quick to take the shot. Let's get this done, right? Right? Good enough. I always said that. Good enough, right? I didn't have to put that hole through the corner. Like I was that.
Just like Command College. Good enough.
Yeah, good enough. Right.
That paper's good enough.
My motto, right? So the interesting thing is that night it was a total different type of event, right? Because it was around midnight, and it was right before it was like February 13th. The next day was like Valentine's Day or something, and it was a SWAT call out. So I don't remember how we got called out back then, or whether we had some app or something, but I did know it was like a hostage situation when I was rolling in, and I walked typical, right, ready to go, got up. I lived in Fontana at the time, so I had a 20-minute drive. Maybe it was much faster at around 11 at night or whatever. But I had I can't remember if I had a take-home car at that time. Yeah, I did. So I had a take-home car, so I was listening to the radio on their way in there. So I was hearing what was going on, but I didn't have any of my equipment with me or anything, so I had to roll to the station. I had a uniform with me, but I didn't have my equipment with me. So I rolled to the station, and in hearing everything, I threw, even being a sniper, being on our team, I threw on everything. So the vest, helmet, I slung an M4. I had my sniper rifle, which was a Remington 700, and a drag bag in the back, in the trunk. And it was about a mile and a half away from the station. So I rolled up there and, full kit, like ready to go. Cause I didn't know if, where they were at in the event. Right. So I don't know how many SWAT operators are there. Obviously patrol was handling it initially. I didn't know if they had, if it was going to be, a crisis entry right there. I didn't know any of this. And right as I roll up, the suspect is shooting out the window at our officers. And, I can hear on the radio, they're like, hey, we need a sniper like now. And that's right when I happened to roll up. So, one of my partners who's SWAT, said, hey, grab your sniper rifle. Let's go. We found a place for you to set up, which would be like, sniper roll. It's like the final firing position, right? Which is this picture here. So that's about 70 yards away from where the house, which is directly across, which is the house that's lit up. So it's about 68, 70 yards away is where I finally set up. And so I end up parking, 200 yards away, and I have to come down and around this apartment complex, and the gate was closed. So I had to figure out how to get in the gate or over the gate or whatever it was with all my shit. My vest is still on. I'm like, man, they're rushing me over to this spot, and then I'm trying to figure out, if you can see, there's some stairs there. So I'm trying to figure out, do I go up and get, the best position to be in as a sniper for those listening is, the most points of contact you can have, the most friction you can have, the most stable you are. So that would be like a prone position. And so if I got up on one of those stairs and got in a prone position, that in theory would be the most stable shot. And I could see as I'm walking up that little round window of, that picture, there was the suspect and the hostage. There was a gun to the back of the hostage's head, and he was walking in and out of that window, and it was a side profile. So, he was walking in and out of that window with the gun to the back of his head. And so they would come in, disappear. So I'm like, shoot, I had to ask, I'm like, who else is in the house, right? I have to process this really fast, right? I don't know, in the SWAT world, I don't know if we have an emergency action team set up, because, as a sniper, if you're going to take a shot, you got to have someone going behind it, because if you miss, the suspect can end up shooting all the other hostages in there. So you have to make sure, you have a team that's ready to go into that home to finish the problem, particularly if I miss the shot, right? So I had to really quickly figure out, okay, who else is in this house? So they told me there's a mom and two small children in the house. And I'm like, well, where are they? We think they're in a back bedroom, which would be, off to if you're looking at the picture off to the right, there's a back bedroom. I'm like, I can't tell what's on the other side of that window, but I can see the suspect and the hostage there. So I made the decision, like on the fly, really quick, to say I'm not going up in that prone position. And the reason I made that decision, because I didn't know exactly where those children and the other hostages were at. And if you know anything about the rounds we used, I already knew I was going to use a bonded round. So it's going to go through and through everything. So including, the suspect. So if it continues through and I hit, the number one thing you don't want to do in a SWAT operator is hit get a hostage, right? That can, you'd be a hero or zero really fast, right, on this incident. So I chose to sit, and I think you showed it. There was a wheelchair, an electric chair on one of those pictures. I pulled that thing around. You could see one right there in the corner. I sat in that chair, so I was in a hasty seating position, and I was using that rickety, pedestrian fence. I think that's what it is for the front part of my rifle, and I was at an upward angle. But before I even got in there, because I had thrown my vest and my helmet on, I had to yank that stuff off because I didn't want to shoot with that big old bulky vest on in that position. Right. That's why you see it on the ground there. I yanked it off, and what went with it was my comm gear. So now I have no communication with our SWAT commander who's on scene. So I have to have all that information relayed to me from another operator that's standing there with me. And when you hear some of the radio traffic, you can kind of hear him talking. So at this point, I get behind the scope, and I could see, I left it powered down, and it was a 3.5 by 10, but I left it powered down. I'm only 68 yards away. I don't need to make any adjustments, right? I'm talking technical stuff. So, and I could see him walking in and out. And I'm like, man, this is it, right? This is what we all train for. Like, this is it. And it happened fast. I'm like, man, and I from out of bed into the station, 10 minutes, pulling up there, getting there, it was happening fast. And he had already the suspect had already shot out, and he shot at our officers through the window. And I'm like, man, I got to make a decision, right? And this is after getting all that stuff off. And then, you all know, we don't keep the sniper rifle loaded. I had to get it all up and running, right? So that took a minute. And by the time I get behind, I'm like, man, he's got the gun to the back of this guy's head. He's walking in and out of the view of that window, and I'm in this hasty position. I'm like, I'm gonna have to do something here, So I just remember at the last second, man, they said something. There's on the radio traffic, like, we're all. I was told that we're all ready to go. So I was confident that we had what we called at the time an E team or an emergency action team ready to go in. Should I miss the shot? And but really, we were ready to go. Really, I had to make a decision. And I remember telling myself, first I decided, there's a couple different ways to take that shot, whether it's, ambushing, tracking. I'm getting into technical stuff. I decided I'm going to track this guy because it's from my distance, it's such a small distance to keep the reticle, keep the crosshairs on where I want to hit him. But I only had from the shoulders up to the head and a side profile. So it was small, and through that window, it was tight. And then I kind of remember, I remember thinking, man, I missed this shot on the range a number of times, man. I'm like, I make a decision here. So I remember telling myself, like, fuck it. And I pulled the trigger, and that rifle bounced, man. And by the time I got that second sight picture, the suspect and the hostages were down. They're out of the view of the window. And I'm just like, man, and then the team's moving in because, the typical, they knew I took the shot. It went on the radio, they moved in, but I can't hear anything. I don't have my comm gear on. So I can't hear anything. What's going on? And to your point, Jaime, after that second sight picture gone, they didn't come back in. And, after the fact, I thought, it would really be nice if that hostage would have jumped up and gave me a thumbs up, right? That guy wasn't moving, right? So that time really, really slowed down. It really did. Like, that felt like it took forever for the guy that was communicating with me to tell me that the suspect was hit and down, and that the hostages were okay. I felt like it took an hour.
So Travis,
yeah.
So you let the shot go. You have no comms. Give us exactly the emotions you're feeling, waiting for news. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Like, are you scared? Are you?
So I came off the rifle. Like, I'm not getting anything back through, obviously I think I stayed on long enough to where I saw our operators in that window, and I'm like, obviously I put the rifle down, and I don't know why, man, but I got up and I started walking in circles, like just
the anxiety.
Of course.
Yeah.
I'm anxious just hearing the story.
And I'm just asking one of the other one of the SWAT guys stayed back with me. One of them took off and ran across the street. I don't know why, to help out or whatever, but I just kept remembering. I said, "Hey, dude, like, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on?" And I felt like it took an hour, you know. And in theory, it took. I mean, in reality, not in theory. In reality, it took seconds before they got back on and said, "Suspects down, taking the hostages out." And we had, you know, 2 small children that were in the back room, and they had to walk past that suspect. So we had a really heads up SWAT operator. He worked his entire career on D Platoon LAPD, came over to West Covina his second career on our team, and had a lot of experience. He actually, I didn't know this, I found out after, but they took bed sheets and threw them over the kids so they didn't have to see that, which was pretty heads up. And got out, but it felt like forever. And then I was out of there, man. I grabbed my rifle, took it with me, and I was on, I think they said I was on scene a total of like 21 minutes from the time I pulled up and left.
So I got to back up with a similar question. What are your exact emotions after you hear that word that you hit the suspect?
Well, I mean, I could tell you that I was relieved, right? Because in our world, in the SWAT world, if you miss that shot, I mean, there's no way I'm going back on the team, right? Like, there's no way. Like, there's no one's going to trust anything you do, and that's you know, on the backside, that's where all my stress came from. Was not that I was in danger, because I wasn't. He wasn't, you know, shooting at me. It was the stress of having to make the decision quickly and knowing that if I miss that shot, my career is probably over, right? Like, no one's ever going to try, particularly SWAT career. I mean, you know, you just lack credibility with everybody, like all that stress. But right after, I was relieved. I'm like, okay, I didn't miss, right?
Well, you're kind of downplaying it by saying you were stressed out about missing the shot. How about hitting somebody else, one of the kids? That's where probably the main stress came from. Who did I hit?
Yeah. It happened so fast, Ryan, that they came back and said the hostages are good, they're okay. So I knew that. I mean, it felt like forever to me, but I did know that before I left, because that came over the radio, right? I never saw him. I never saw him get pulled out or anything, but I was told they were. But what I'll tell you, what was really kind of sucked is they took me and put me in a room in the station. And I sat there forever, you know, with one other guy. And it's like, dude, can I go walk around? You know, like, can I? And they're like, no, just stay here. You know, that wasn't good. But, you know, I guess we do that to keep me from talking or whatever. But
so I got 2 questions for you, Travis. One, we talked about kind of how you felt after what you experienced after. So I want to know what you experienced, what your feelings were, what your thought process was, if there even was, before you took the shot. Because it's not like in your particular incident, it's a little bit different, because, you know, a lot of times we go to these critical incidents as cops and we show up, and whether it be like a T-stop or a call for service, and somebody pulls a gun, so it's very quick, right? So there's no, for the officer, a lot of times there's no thinking. It's just a split-second decision that you make, you know, to engage the suspect. In your particular case, there was a little bit of lag time, right? You didn't go on scene and then pull the trigger. It was like, it was, you know, you were there for what, 21 minutes, you said? So there was some time that you probably processed, like, okay, this guy's been shooting at us. There's probably a good chance here that I'm probably gonna fire a shot here. What were you thinking? What was going through your head, knowing that if you pull the trigger, that there's a great possibility that you're going to end somebody's life? What was going through your head at that time? Before?
Well, as I was walking up, I mean, admittedly, I was nervous, right? I was like, man, I mean, we trained for this. I trained for this a lot. But I was nervous, but it was moving so fast, I didn't really have much time to think.
Sure.
And by the time, you know, I was going through the motions, and I think the training really helped that, right? I was going through the motions of getting set up, getting the rifle loaded up, getting, you know, everything we did in training, you know, because we would train that way, you know, going cold, right? Like everything up, set everything up, and now it's happening now. But I do remember going like to myself, like, fuck. And I had a buddy next to me that, who's SWAT guy. He goes, you're going to take this shot, right? I'm like, dude, shut the fuck, I'm like, well, kind of, okay, but I was, I can't, honestly, I can't remember. Like, it happened so fast. I can tell you what happened after, but I can't remember. I do remember telling myself, fuck. I do remember saying that, like, fuck, man, I'm gonna have to do this, right? Don't fucking miss it,
Right.
And he was moving in and out so fast that I was a little worried I would. And I was worried about hitting one of the hostages, of course, but I just remember saying, okay, this is it. Like, this is it. I'm either going to do this or I'm not. Right. And,
Right.
I made the decision, like, this is what I said, I got to do it. If I fuck it up, I fuck it up. It's over for me, hopefully not over for anybody else. Because there's a situation where I could have missed the shot and the emergency action team go in there and handle it. But, it was moving so fast. I didn't have time to process that after. That all came after the fact, where I started to try to, you talk about just surviving an incident versus processing an incident. And that all came after, when I started to rethink everything, like, oh man, what if I did miss? And, my guys went in, because it's a team effort, right? Like, we're all SWAT guys. This is not a, as a sniper, it's not all about, it's, yeah, you're the guy that took that shot, but this is a team effort. Like, those hostages wouldn't have been saved without the team there, not just me or one person, the sniper, right? It's a team thing. And even, later down the road, when we, all the ceremonies and awards and all that, we did it as a team, not me. I didn't get an individual. It was a team award, right? It was a team thing, because that's how we train to resolve these things as a team.
So walk us, here's the big question. Walk us through the after, what you felt, what you experienced, in the coming days, weeks, maybe years, maybe you're still dealing with some residual stuff. Walk us through.
Yeah. So not so much anymore. After, there's a period of time after where my lieutenant of the team at the time and one of the sergeants, they had set up a bunch of debriefs for other SWAT teams. So we did travel around a bit, went to Texas, different thing. And I don't know if that was the best thing for me, but it wasn't really the best way for me to process it. What I really stressed out about is the what if. I really went through that what if loop, and it really bothered me. Like, okay, what if I would have missed? What if of that? And then I started to think, man, this is the second time this happened to me. Like, is there a third? Like, what if I fuck this up the third time? Like,
sure.
And I started to replay, like, man, what if I would have hit the hostage? And I went through that whole thing for a long time, and it bothered me. I'll be honest. Like, I was at that, I started to go wind down from wanting to be on SWAT. I'm like, okay, I don't want to be put in a situation again. Like, it was stressful, to have to make the decision. And I don't, I'm being, I'm showing some humility here, but it's important because, we all want to portray to be tough and everything. And I wouldn't say I'm a weak guy. I got through it, and I survived the test. Right. But someone did lose his life that night. And, that bothered me too. And, I think as normal human beings, we're not conditioned to take someone's life. We're not conditioned to kill people. Right. And I'm not a military guy. I'm not even a guy that came up shooting guns and stuff. I didn't touch a gun until I got in academy. I wasn't that guy, right? I'll tell you, I have a lot of respect for our military and the training they go through and what they deal with in conflict, because it's about 10 times more than that one night, that incident, right?
Sure.
And if that one incident affected me the way it did, on questioning, my abilities, can I do it again? Do I want to keep doing it? Do I want, I avoided a lot of things to stay out of a situation, right? I slowed down in patrol, I stopped being as proactive. Like, I went through all that, where I got a lot of grace from my partners, right? Like, hey, man, I wasn't the hard charging guy anymore. Like, I don't even know if they noticed because I got so much grace on being, being successful. But the reality of it is I didn't want to be in a position where I had to endure that stress of making a decision again. I really didn't.
Yeah. So here's a good question. I wondered this myself. So, and the three of us have all been on SWAT teams, for a considerable amount of time. Speaking from a sniper's perspective, right? Your purpose on a SWAT team to train so that if there's an incident like this, that you're able to react and rely on your training and experience to neutralize the threat and essentially, have a successful operation, which is what you did. So I guess my question is, and this is a good question for a lot of people that are in your position, right? Tactical teams, even people that aren't on SWAT teams. What would you say now that you've been in this role twice, actually? How do you condition yourself for, right? Because you train, right? You shoot these paper targets, and you probably train once or twice a month for all these years you're on the team, and sometimes it becomes redundant, and you don't think twice about it, right? But you train for it, but when it's actually time to get the job done, it's different. What would you say as advice to somebody? Like, how do you condition yourself for that, or is there even such a thing that exists?
Yeah, I do. I think the mindset before the event is huge, right? And the reason why I tell you that I was the guy that was the shittiest shot on the sniper team is because my mindset before that event could have been better. So what I tell people is, if you have the responsibility, you've taken on the responsibility of that position, whether it's on a SWAT team, you're in the military, whatever it might be, that mindset really has to start. That mental conditioning and the scenario-based training have to shape the reactions that help you be successful. Like I really truly believe that, and you have to. I would tell people, take the training serious, challenge yourself in training, even when it's uncomfortable, and go through the scenarios in your head. If you have that responsibility, that your day can come where you have to make that decision,
Right.
and keep yourself healthy and fit, and as much as you can, so that you can make the decision when it comes in, be able to process it after. But
Right.
I think, and then have the ability to have the mindset after the event too. So self-awareness is huge. Humility is huge. Vulnerability, being able to be vulnerable is huge. To be able to talk to people through the event, to process it, so that you can avoid unhealthy coping. The isolation, the denial, the alcohol. It's important to pick up on the warning signs, right? Because I had dreams about that incident over and over and over again, and they would go down different paths, right? I couldn't control it.
Yeah.
And I'm getting vulnerable here for a minute, right? So I couldn't control it because, and if I was drinking or something that night, it would be worse, right? So, there were a few times when I would wake up and my wife would tell you where I had the anxiety built up again, just like that night of having to that stress. So the anxiety came back, but it typically would happen when in the middle of the night when I was sleeping. So I would wake up and literally just walk in circles again by my bed. And that happened a number of times. And I didn't take medication or anything. Like, I didn't know how to control that for a long time. I don't even know if I really completely processed that too, that I can tell you that it doesn't happen much anymore at all. Like, I don't have those same dreams. I think time has gone by and healed.
What other coping mechanisms did you use or employ during or the time following, or do you think it just at some point in time just dissipate?
Well, back in 2010, wellness wasn't a word, man. Like,
no, it wasn't.
it wasn't a thing. It was like my whole attitude was, dude, stop being a pussy. You gotta man up and get through your career, right? Like, I didn't show anybody anything. Like, I probably admittedly drank more than I should have, but I would tell people, don't do that. I think that the resources we have today for people are so much better to be able just to talk through it. And I just didn't realize that simply talking to people and having a little humility, really could probably would have helped with the dreams that I couldn't control because I'm talking through it. Right. But I never did it. So I just let time heal me, I guess. But going, if 2010 was 2025, I think I would have had a bunch of people providing those resources to me, right? I didn't have anyone doing that back then. They sent me to the psychologist. They gave me 3 days off, and said, make sure you go to the shrink before you come back to work, and don't show, my attitude was don't show any weakness. Like, you're good, move on, right? And at the time I was in the detective bureau, so I remember kind of walking back up, and like I walk in and you expect all this, standing ovation, I guess, to some extent, right? No, no one said shit, right? Like, next business day, right? No one really said anything, like, well, whatever,
Hey, Travis, you were talking about you'd have dreams about this incident, and I think most of the times when cops have traumatic incidents, they always hone in on one particular moment that they think about at night at 3 a.m. What moment in that incident was it for you that you always think about?
Just deciding to actually take the shot.
Right before,
like no one else can solve this right now. It's you. Like, your number's up. Like, the making the decision to pull the trigger. Like, because the probability of missing that shot, and thinking about it now, was pretty high, with that small window, 68, 70 yards away, which we know typically is not a difficult shot. But the movement made it harder, right? Now, my area of tracking was smaller, but and then the area, available to place the shot, right? Was small. So I think, it always would focus back on that, the moment that you had to make a decision, like, okay, you got to do it. There's no one else here to do it. There was no other sniper there, like, to switch out and say, hey, dude, you do it, right? There's no one else there. Everyone there was expecting it to come, right? Because that seemed like the only option at that time to resolve the situation. That stress was like nothing other I had to deal with in police work, right? I always had time to make decisions on everything else, typically, because I'd never been in a situation where I make a T-stop, someone jumps out and starts shooting at me. Like, I've never been in that situation, right? I know I have other friends that have been, and that's definitely a different type of incident, but that's not what this was. But the stress of having to make that decision, knowing that the failure was present, was probably what got me, right?
I remember in command or on the SWAT team, I remember hearing about it when it happened and reading about it and hearing about a debrief, and I was like, man, that was some major league stuff. Literally a 1 in 1,000 shot, 1 in a million shot. And then I met you in command college, and being as humble as you are, you never mentioned it. And then at one point during cigars and some whiskey, it started leaking out, and I was like, that was you?
Yeah.
After a year and a half of us joking and being the class clowns, and it was just I was honored to know the dude that's you.
Yeah, I used to always have. Yeah, you're probably looking at me like that was you. You're a little fucked up, man. Like, dude, really? Yeah, I always used to joke with people like, "Hey, don't be too squared away," because the real squared away guys never get the opportunity to be tested, right?
There's some truth to that.
Things come your way, right?
Yeah.
You don't know those cops,
You know what's really interesting, and I'm not gauging, what's more critical or what causes more stress with respect to OISs, but in your particular case, you had a little bit of time to process things right before it happened. Whereas I said a lot of times, in my OISs, there wasn't no process. Guy pulls a gun out, you shoot. That's just, you rely solely on your training. It's not thought process. It's simply training. In your particular case, there was time to think about it. So I always wonder, at least to me, in my opinion, I think that of it in itself induces a little bit more stress, because there's no quick response. There's no action from the suspect and a reaction from you. It's for you. It's okay. I gotta sit here. I gotta get on scope. I gotta process this. Okay, is this guy really pointing the gun at this hostage's head? Is it go time? And you have that time to think. And I think that's an extra layer of anxiety and stress, for the individual that has to make that decision, so to speak. I on the flip side, I've never been in that situation, where you said I've never been in those split-second decision type of things. I've been in, I've only been in these ones, whereas I've never been in your type of situation, to have to process it and think about it. Which, at least in my opinion, I think it probably makes it worse to think about it instead of just reacting based off of, training, so to speak.
That's a great point, Heineck. Like you said, when you have a shooting where you react, for example, a traffic stop and someone comes out firing at you, what you're using is reaction and gross motor skills, right? You're pulling your gun out, you're putting fire down range. Travis was forced to calculate and use fine motor skills. The finger, pressure of a trigger finger, alignment, that alone added with the stress, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, and the big difference was in both of mine, particularly the hostage rescue one, the 2010 one, is the suspect didn't even know I was there, right? Like my life's not in danger at that moment. Where like in your instance, Jaime, what I think you're talking about when someone pulls a gun out, like instantly you feel that fight or flight, your life's in danger. There's a significant difference, and not that one is. Both of them are stressful, and until you go through it, I guess, but I was going to bring a pretty valid point. What was I going to say? Man, I lost my train of thought. I was going to say something along the lines of
along those lines, I think I'm pulling it from your brain. Having been in those two, what advice would you have to any cops, not only coming on the job, but someone that encounters any sort of traumatic incident, especially in regards to how you deal with it and the aftermath?
Well, I think the first and foremost, and it brings me all the way back to when my dad sat me down when I applied and he said, "Hey, can you take someone's life?" And I didn't take that question seriously. I think if you get into this line of work, you really have to, everyone needs to ask themselves that, whether it's police work or the military, you have to ask yourself, do you have the ability to do that? That's the first thing I would tell people. The second thing is you really have to understand that at any moment, a critical incident, someone can be confronted with it, right? So you have to know that you're doing this job, knowing that it can happen in any moment, so they have to, and my advice would be prepared for it. Know that it's going to happen to you. Because I think what happens is we start this job and we get complacent, right? We go to call after call, it's the same thing every day. It's just reports, it's this, and the next thing and particularly, I mean, you guys work in Pomona. How many times has this happened? I mean, you guys have lost some officers that, I wonder if they thought that was going to happen to them that night, I might have lost track of your question, Ryan. Did I answer it? I just...
You did.
It's about, I think my biggest advice is don't wait for something to happen to seek the wellness opportunities our people have now.
Mm-hmm.
Like start now, right? Go talk to people now, right? Be prepared, for when that happens. Open those line of communications before a critical incident happens. Take those resources now. And it could, if it's something minor, talk about it. If it's something personal, talk. I think embracing the culture of being able to talk and share feelings, expose yourself a little bit more, what used to be taboo.
Yeah.
I think that's where it's going to help the most for people, because they know when something happens, that's available to them. And instead of taking those isolation, unhealthy coping routes, they know that route's there, right? And they can get through those incidents a lot easier than maybe I did or other people did back before we had all these resources.
What you said, Travis, is spot on. I'm going to share just a quick story because it was something that happened just recently. So this past week, I had a phone call from a buddy of mine that I've known for years. He's a Baldwin Park police officer, and he was involved in the OIS. He was a shooter in the OIS. And he called me this past week at work, and he says, "Hey, you got a second to talk?" And I said, "Yeah, let me shut my door to the watch commander's office." And I said, "What's up?" And he says, "I want to know why all of a sudden I'm having all these nightmares. It's already been, a few months that have passed since this incident." And hold on, let me adjust my mic. I think it's falling off here. So he says, "I want to know why why all of a sudden I'm having these nightmares at nighttime when I haven't had them before in the past couple weeks. It's been recurring every night." So, the reason I relate this is because you had said that, you were at nighttime, you were like, you were walking around and couldn't sleep and these type of things. So I guess to the followers, to people that have experienced something like this, believe it or not, and I'm sure you know this, so I'm just kind of preaching to the choir, but that's very typical. It's very, very typical to experience that in a traumatic incident like an OIS. And the way that I explain it to my buddy is the reason it usually happens like at nighttime when we sleep is because during the daytime, our minds are occupied, right? We're busy. We're doing this. We're at work. We're handling calls. We're doing paperwork, admin stuff, whatever it is your job duties are, right? So your mind is already focused on something else, right? At nighttime, what happens at nighttime? Our brain rests, right? For the most part, we're not doing paperwork. We're not going to calls. We're not listening to the radio. So at night when we're getting ready to sleep, our mind is at its most peaceful time, so to speak, right? And that's when the mind is able to do its deepest emotional processing for what we call unfinished business, right? And the unfinished business is the why, the what ifs that we ask ourselves. So I kind of explained it to him. I'm like, "Hey, listen, your mind is at its restful point now. So now it's trying to process all the shit that you can't do when you're awake and, doing your normal stuff, when you're awake. It's now hyper focusing on the traumatic stuff like the shootings, and, it's in a way, it's a way for the mind to kind of cope with it. It's to try to find solutions. And that's why it works in overdrive at nighttime, which results in us staying awake. We can't sleep. We walk in circles, and whatever the case is, we wake up, we watch TV at 2 a.m, those type of things. So I guess for people that experience that, I think it's important for them to know that it's not unorthodox, weird. You're not fucked up because you can't sleep at night. I hate to use the word normal in traumatic situations, but it's those factors are normal for experiencing traumatic events, so to speak. And, I've experienced it myself being a military vet. For years, I've suffered from PTSD and have sought therapy through the VA and through other means. And for years, I did the same thing, and I wondered to myself, why is it at nighttime? Why do I have these nightmares, or why do I do these small, things that maybe your normal person wouldn't do? And I've come to realize through the years that they're all normalized actions that we do as a result of post-traumatic. It's the way that our body and our mind just try to cope with it and process it. So when you say stuff like that, I always tell myself like those actions are very normal. As a matter of fact, what isn't normal is if you didn't experience those type of things, right? Because one of the things you said, Travis, is you said that after your shooting, that you took a life, right? And when you said that, I wrote a little note here because it humanizes you, right? You're not a robot. You didn't just shoot somebody and you're like, okay, he was a bad guy. I don't give a fuck about you. We're still human beings at the end of the day, right? And the fact of the matter is you did take a life of somebody that was threatening somebody else's life. So you had to in your job. But the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, when we go home and take the uniform off, we're still human beings, right? And I'm not sure if you practice faith or whatever. I have my beliefs, but I still think at the end of the day, when I take my uniform off, I still ended a life, right? I still took somebody's life. Somebody loved that person, maybe kids, mother, father, somewhere along the lines. And I think it's that humanization that you talked about, right? That really grounds us. And I honestly, I admire that out of people that, that's like, fuck man, I still, I didn't feel bad that I took a suspect's life. I feel bad that I took a human being's life at the end of the day. You know what I mean? And I wish it's those things that like the masses knew about. The public knew that what we actually go through for these things, and it's just not like, oh, we just killed this motherfucker. But no, I killed somebody. Yeah, he caused me to do it. But at the end of the day, I still took somebody's life, and that still does cause somewhat of an anxiety and stress on your normal, prudent person, right, that tries to live a good life, so to speak.
Yeah.
So that part really stuck out.
Well, we're not psychotic, right? Like
Exactly.
we're normal human beings. So, anyone that is going to sit here and tell me that, oh, it's, that was a good, that was justified. So it's normal. It's not normal. Like it's not normal for a human being to take someone's life. Now
No, it's not.
I've never been in the military. I've been in that situation, but I would probably say that most of our, soldiers that were deployed in recent conflicts that had a lot of traumatic incidents probably go through the same thing, right? Like it's not, I know I was trained and built this way, right? But it's still not normal. It's something that has to be processed.
Yeah, absolutely.
We all have ethics and morals built into us. And if we didn't have them, we wouldn't be police officers, to be honest. So, we would never get the job to begin with. So,
yeah, spot on.
Yeah. I did. It is almost like a surreal feeling to know that, taking that, for me, that I've taken someone's life, and, although justified, it's still weird, right? That it's weird. Someone did love that guy, and yeah, he made some mistakes, and it cost him his life.
I really relate that to my first, and I was only 18 and a half years old, 19, when I was getting ready to deploy to my first tour in Iraq, and I'm always very honest about this story with people because I think it's a testament to my character, at least, because I always tell people I was scared. I was really, really scared because I was like, man, am I going to die? I was in my late teens. I wasn't even old enough to drink a beer yet, but I was old enough to take a life, right? And I remember that there was a lot of people in my platoon that would always say, like, I can't wait to go over there. We're going to fucking kill bodies, and we're going to we're going to do this. And in my head, I always said, are they really fucked up? Or like, are they just putting out a front? Because I never said that. And this was even after the subsequent 2 tours that I did. I never, ever, ever, ever said, we're going to go kill bodies or let's go. I was always afraid. Because I didn't want to die. And I was like, man, I'm killing somebody that's probably fighting for their country too. That's probably just as fucking scared as shit as I am. Right. Somebody that's just fighting for the cause. Like they're not fighting to kill me. They're not fighting to kill Jaime. They're just fighting for their country, doing the same shit that I'm doing. You know what I mean? And I always remember that. I always remember the reactions from people that, you know, and I always had one eye open, like, man, I think your thinking is really fucked up that you want to go over there and kill somebody, even though it's a war and it's, you know, war is a messy thing. I never really wanted to kill people. And, you know, I was always scared to do it. I was always scared. And I think that, like, it humanized me, right? It grounded me and it made me cautious and cognizant. And I think it just made me a better person at the end of the day. And again, maybe my fellow Marines were just put on a fucking front. They didn't want people to know that they were weak by saying that they were scared. But I always felt that way in all my tours. I was always scared. I was afraid to, you know, to go into combat. And, you know, there was never a time where I wasn't scared going into conflict like that, you know?
Yeah. I think especially young men and women that, you know, in your situation where you join the military, they took on the responsibility, right? And I think
absolutely.
And they own that responsibility. And I think the way, when you talk about how people speak that way, I think that's their way of coping with what they know they just took on and what has very great potential of what could happen. I really truly think that, because I do, you know, give a lot of grace in those situations, because I think that generally speaking, people, you know, that serve our country are good people, and, you know, that's just their way to cope with what the responsibility is. And you know, and it's the same thing in police work. We hear this same type of talk, maybe at a different level, lower level in the locker room, right? Mm-hmm. And it's them processing what they might have to do, you know? I mean, that could be good. I just think that we have other ways to do that now, you know, that people could talk about that before it ever happens, so that they're more prepared.
Yeah, absolutely.
To do that.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like we could definitely go another hour. You guys really got some good points at the end. Just hearing you guys talk in the last 5 minutes brings home a point, is that cops are human. All the, you know, emotions that Jaime just spoke about in war and being scared, you know, first of all, it takes courage to admit. And then Travis, and the moments right before he pulled that trigger, I can't even fathom what that took, and having the mental fortitude to actually pull that trigger. You know, it becomes real quick. That being said, it's been an amazing episode, and I'm going to turn it over first back to you, Trav. Do you have any closing words for us?
No, I just, you know, tell everybody out there, you know, we've gotten a good spot in law enforcement where we're really valuing and making wellness and mental health of our culture. So don't make the mistakes I made. You know, I think it's a good thing. Take advantage of it. Take advantage of it before something happens. Take advantage of it after. Know what's out there for you. And, you know, I think that will help a person, you know, get through their career live and healthy, and not get prosecuted. You know, make
That's the goal.
So,
hell of a good point.
Don't. It's not. I guess I'll end on this, right? Like, for me, it's not weakness. It's not weakness. You know, and that's where the misnomer was when I was coming up. People thought it was weakness to share that, you know, you were having nightmares about this, or you had concerns about that, or that, hey, you know, I really think I could take someone's life if I had to, but I want to talk about it. It's not weakness, and that's where we need to be. So you know, so that people can successfully get through a critical incident.
Cool. Travis, well, first of all, I want to apologize. When I first met you in Command College, I disregarded you as a class clown, the jokester. How is this guy going to get past 14 and a half months of Command College? But you soon proved me wrong. I mean, Command College, as you know, during the last assignment, you were like Eric Gagne, the closer for the Dodgers, who came through and just did an articulate presentation and just did amazing. You're such a smart guy. In fact, midway through this episode, Jaime was texting me and saying, wow, he's really smart and a great speaker. So Kudos to you. Verne PD did a great choice in picking you for captain. They're all better for it.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So just great episode. And closing out, one thing that resonated with me is you said the what if that cops go through, right? Like, what if I missed the shot? What if I hit a kid? Last episode I was talking about the Sean Diamond incident where I missed one warrant out of hundreds. And my trauma was, what if I had been there and, I was always on entry. If my footing was 2 feet over, which would have caused Sean to be 2 feet over and the round would have missed him, right? Or if we get into TCs, you get into a TC, you get a letter of reprimand, and then as soon as you go 10-8, what's in your mind? What if I TC again, right? But it just kind of goes to remind us, let's not put this stress on ourselves that we don't need to. There's so much stress that this job puts on us by itself. Learn to mitigate the stress, learn to let the small stuff be the small stuff. Learn to compartmentalize when you have to, and learn to release in a healthy manner when you can, which is what we're trying to accomplish with this episode. So, Travis, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. And with that, Jaime, what you got for us?
Yeah, so a couple of comments, just for, I guess, Travis to know. When we first met, we actually went out to lunch downtown Laverne at Lawrenceburg, and we had just a brief exchange, a small conversation. And what you don't know is I was texting Ryan during that conversation. I was telling him, hey, this is a really good dude. He's a jokester. He knows, he could talk shit. He's professional. I like him. Good dude. He's going to be a good guest on the podcast. I like him. I feel him out. I like him already. And it's funny because Ryan wasn't bullshitting. I did text him during this podcast, and you probably can't see it, but you won't be able to see it because it's blurry. But I said, he speaks very well, homie. Really good guest. And this is before I called Ryan Bulber Walters. But you do, Laverne is lucky because they have someone in a leadership position that not just is able to talk the talk, but has really walked the walk. Really, through the traumatic experiences that you've been through, and you've lived law enforcement on both sides, and you've admitted that you live on a side where mental health is seen as a weakness, right? And there's other ways to cope. In private, and now you've seen the shift, and you have adapted to law enforcement's current culture, and have been able to pull yourself away from that old school thinking into where we are today, and modernize yourself, and to say, hey, look, I've been there. I was that, that person that used to say it's weak. I've learned through the years, through mistakes, through trauma, through experiencing all these things, that now I'm telling you, because I've lived through these things, use these resources. And a lot of them are free. Most of them are free. Use these resources. So, kudos to you, and the cops that work for Laverne are so fortunate to have someone like yourself that's an advocate for these for wellness and mental health. But not just because you've been to a class and you read that it was good, right? Not because you were on an online seminar and seen it, or you picked up a book and read it, right? You've lived through these things, not just once, twice, and then of course cumulative trauma through the years of being a police officer and being in SWAT, but especially being in two situations where, like we talked about, you had the time to process these things, and not just, but one of them you were the victim of a 245, right? Somebody fucking stabbed you. That's very rare in our profession for those things to happen. Not just to shoot somebody, but to be in an OIS twice. On top of that, a hostage type of situation. In one of those situations, be the victim of a crime. So you definitely come with a lot of experience. We're grateful to have you on this podcast. Great for you to share a lot of the wisdom. And I can just promise you that you definitely are going to touch someone somewhere that you'll never meet, you'll never know, and they're never going to tell you thank you. But they'll probably send us a message somewhere on our Instagram, or maybe not, but that you've definitely touched someone and let them know that it's okay to reach out for help, and it's okay to experience these type of things. We're very grateful, very blessed to have you come on this show. And we always gauge, at least for me, I gauge how good our guests are by the amount of whiskey that I drink. And normally, this is not to knock any of the guests, because all of our guests are fabulous. But usually, I go through a glass, on an episode. This is my third glass that I went through already.
Here.
That goes to show you the caliber of the guests that you were on this show. So I'm grateful for you, Travis. Thanks a lot. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. And again, Laverne is lucky to have a captain like yourself.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I feel very fortunate to be able to be on here, and you guys are doing the Lord's work. And like you said, reach out to one person, and it all makes it worth it, right? One person gets something out of this, then it was worth everything. So I appreciate it. Not the easiest thing to talk about myself, but
never is. Yeah, never is. But
yeah,
thank you, brother. We really appreciate it. And Ryan, before we cap this thing off, anything else? Any last closing words?
No, I am content. You guys said it all. It was such an amazing episode. And yeah, I noticed that 3 drinks. I'm proud of you. Living up to whiskey and war stories.
I am. It was good, man. It was deep. I like these deep conversations.
Yeah, it was a really good conversation.
Well, I guess you could say another way to really help your mental well-being is to go to a Dodger game, man. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's always fun to see a team win.
Yep.
Good
Absolutely.
I like it. And on that note, this is going to conclude season 3, episode 8 of Whiskey and War Stories. Thanks, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Catch us on the next episode in about 2 weeks. And that's it. Thanks, everybody. And we're signing out.
All right. Good night.
Cheers, everybody. Cheers.
Night.